You're listening to The Q Switch with your host, Spence.
Welcome one and all to the Q Switch Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Spence, and the mission of this show is to tackle subjects currently impacting ophthalmology, and we pull in leading eye care professionals and industry players to discuss their unique perspectives. So let's get right into it. So, what if the greatest breakthrough in modern medicine wasn't a new drug or a new laser or even a new surgical technique, but the way we treat our patients? What if there were real differentiators between practices that thrive and those that struggle comes down to something as human as the experience we deliver? Today, we're diving into exactly that topic with one of the most respected voices in the field of patient experience, and that's Shareef Mahdavi. Shareef is the CEO and Chief Experience Officer at Laser Eye Center of Silicon Valley, one of the nation's leading refractive surgical practices specializing in modern vision correction. He's also the author of the influential book, Beyond Bedside Manner, Insights on Perfecting the Patient Experience, a guide that has reshaped how doctors think about the doctor-patient relationship. Shareef has spent decades helping physicians and practices unlock value by creating unforgettable patient experiences, and we're thrilled to have him here today. Shareef, welcome to the show.
Well, David, thank you. It's just a great moment to be with you, and appreciate that introduction. Very kind.
So, Shareef, you've spent years helping practices rethink the way they deliver care. In your view, how has the patient experience evolved over the last few decades in healthcare?
Well, the problem is, David, that it really hasn't evolved that significantly, especially when compared to everything else going on in the world around us in our role as consumers and customers out there, right? Going to restaurants, going to hotels, going into stores, that whole experience has evolved greatly, right? And in fact, the battleground for a consumer, not only their money, but their time and attention has really shifted. And we see that, in fact, social media and the digital realm has changed the landscape dramatically. But when it comes to healthcare, we're way behind. I think we're at least a decade behind. And part of that is just it's an innate resistance. And when you think about it, when I think about what I've observed where doctors say, well, we're different. Medical and healthcare are just different than everything that people spend their money on. So we should play by a different set of rules. Or it's just too hard because we're so busy in the practice, we don't have time to do this or to focus on this. And so, what I've seen, particularly in the elective medicine, the things that people pay for directly, is a market that is only a fraction of what it could be. And the missing link in all of this is this thing called patient experience.
So the evolution ties directly into how patients choose where to go for care. So building on that, you mentioned, social media platforms and all. Well, the internet has changed everything from online reviews to star ratings. Patients today are more empowered than ever. How has this shift influenced the way practices grow or fail to grow?
Well, they're starting to pay attention to that, right? Because the notion that, and some doctors early on thought, well, we should somehow put a stop to these reviews, or somehow medical practices, doctors' offices should not be reviewed. And, I think that train has left the station years ago. So instead of resisting it, embrace it. And what the best practices out there are doing is they're recognizing that the patient review process becomes a great feedback loop to help them improve. Because we know as consumers, when we go do research for anything, we look, well, what's the rating? How many stars? What are people saying? And if something has 1 or 2 stars, we're probably not going to engage. We're just going to move on to the next option. And the same thing is true when choosing doctors. We know that, 80, 90% of consumers are researching doctors first before they're ever calling a practice. We know that to be the case. Another really interesting data point is that 5 out of 10 consumers will switch providers. They will go to someone out of network if that out-of-network doctor has really good reviews and better reviews than the people that go to a network. Yeah.
It's that compelling and that drives behavior.
Absolutely.
That is astounding.
Doctors can't afford to not pay attention, right? They can't afford to ignore this. And it's amazing to me that I find doctors who don't have a website. I found doctors who don't have many reviews. That's the first and best place to start if you want to build reputation in this modern era where the advertising you do, or just the fact that you exist, unless you're the only one in your town doing what you do, uh, there's gonna be competition. And
Hmm.
the risk not paying attention to this is people choose someone else.
And in your book, you take these big shifts and distill them into 6 powerful drivers for building the modern practice. In Beyond Bedside Manner, you lay out those 6 critical drivers. Before we get into them one by one, what was the turning point that convinced you this was the framework doctors and patients really needed?
I would just say my experience both in industry. I worked for two of the big companies. We now know them as Zeiss and Johnson and Johnson, but back in the day, it was Humphrey Instruments and Visex. And I had roles similar to the ones you've had, sales and marketing, and eventually leading the team. And we were able to launch LASIK in this country and the laser for that from Visex. What we saw was immediately fast, rapid growth. I mean, the whole industry of laser vision correction got started in the mid to late 90s, but the problem was it really sputtered out. And what I saw was that we weren't doing a good enough job of creating perception of value. Everything was about how good the outcome was and seeing 2020, and very little attention was paid to the process by which we educate and nurture patients along the way and help them understand how wonderful not only the technology is, but the practice providing it. We literally missed that opportunity. And instead, some doctors went the other way and they said, well, if we just lower the price, the market demand will boom. And that was an epic disaster. That was a failure. When the price was lowered, actually procedure volumes went down nationally in the US. And then as things like the femtosecond laser and customized treatments became available, well, that increased cost to the doctor was passed on to the consumer. And those raising prices actually are associated with return of demand. It's really interesting. So I would tell you it was that experience, then looking also at what plastic surgery was doing with plastic surgeons doing breast augmentation, and they didn't have this up and down. They were raising prices and demand was increasing. So I said, well, what's going on here? What could ophthalmologists and refractive surgeons learn from their plastic surgery colleagues? And that's really what got me started on the path of understanding it was this notion of patient experience.
So let's go through those drivers, starting with the first one, profession. You pose the question, what business are you really in? That's a bold way to begin. How do most doctors answer that, and what do you think they're missing?
Well, they might answer it by saying, well, I'm in the eye surgery business. And I would say, no, eye surgery is what you do, right? You
Hmm.
can do better. You can aspire better. And, I was preparing for another talk, and there's with the Academy in Orlando coming up, they were talking about now Walt Disney and Disney theme. And I thought about what Walt Disney accomplished. Because when you go to Disneyland or Disney World, yes, you're going to a theme park, but that's not the business they're in. I would contend that Disney is in the experience business, the family experience business, and in the memory making business. That's really what Disney is about. And that's why over 60 years now that Disney empire has expanded and mushroomed because they're meeting a need for people to
Hmm.
connect as families. And they did a great job of getting people to not only come to their parks, but to buy things, including mouse ears and everything else, right? Memorabilia to take home. So doctors, I think the way that translates to the field of medicine is doctors can think at a higher level. I'll just go from, it's not ophthalmology, but audiology, the audiologist that I referenced in the book who said, I am in the communications business. That's beautiful. You think about that. He is understanding that what he's really doing is he's restoring the ability of his customer, that patient who is hard of hearing, to communicate with their loved ones, with their business partners. That's incredible, right there. The, the key is to focus on not the service we provide, but the experience and the transformation that is taking place in our patients. And there's nothing bigger and better than eye surgery, right? Ophthalmology and optometry providing eye services are really the richest environments for us to think more profoundly about what business we're truly in.
So once doctors understand their business, the natural next step is understanding their customers, their patients themselves. You asked, what do patients really want? In your experience, what are some of the biggest misconceptions doctors have about patient desires?
Well, the fact that so many practices still call that front room a waiting room, to me, is exhibit A in the problem, right? Think about what a waiting room connotes. you're going to wait. Subconsciously, what we're saying is, you know what, my time as a doctor is more valuable than your time as a patient. So you will sit and wait until I'm ready to see you. And of course, we need to have grace around emergency situations. And, there's some patients that take longer, but we shouldn't have a waiting room. That's why later on in the book, I talk about blowing up the waiting room. So we know what they don't want, right? What patients want is things we all want. If we're going to be a customer, we want to be listened to, we want to be respected, and time is a key element of respect, right?
Sure.
We want to be cared for. We want our questions to be answered. We want to be treated nicely. I mean, these are just normal human things that have really been stripped away out of the healthcare environment. And I don't think doctors intend to do this. I just think it's the busyness of the business that has led down this path. And the doctors that recognize this go, wait a minute, there's going to be a better way, and have restructured their patient flow to better accommodate what patients need. If you're going to make me wait, give me something to do, and don't give me a clipboard with really poorly Xerox forms to fill out of information that I've already given you 5 other times, right? Don't do that, right? But either educate me, entertain me, or allow me to refresh. Those are the 3 things that need to happen. And in there are activities that you can do that actually will help bide the time, right? Because there are going to be situations where people have to wait. But first and foremost, just change the name of the room, right? Just eliminating what we call a negative cue in the whole experience of the patient. I mean, David, do you want to walk into a store and be told, "There, sit there and wait, and someone will get to you in 30 minutes"?
No, absolutely not.
Right. You'd walk out. You'd walk out and go to another store that sold the same stuff. Okay. It's no different in medicine. It is absolutely no different in medicine. And your earlier comment about consumers now being empowered, absolutely. So doctors are on notice because people are talking, and it's moved away from the analog era of they send a complaint letter, right? They send a complaint letter. Now they just post it online for the world to see. So the stakes are a lot higher.
Of course, patients' needs can't be met without the right people delivering the care. Let's talk about the team aspect. What do you look for when building a staff that can deliver not just medical care, but memorable care?
Well, team members need to be evaluated less on the technical skills they bring, because I think all that can be taught, right?
Hmm.
Except for the surgeon doing surgery. And of course, certain parts of the exam, but most of the diagnostic testing now is on automated computerized equipment that was started by Humphrey, back in the day, right? It was my first role in ophthalmology with the Humphrey field analyzer for glaucoma, really replacing the Goldman perimetry and the tangent screen, right? So we can train people to do all that stuff. What I think is really hard to train is what I call the heart of the servant, right? Understanding people who really enjoy taking care of others. They have a hospitality quotient built into their DNA, and they just enjoy it. They're kind, they're patient, and that's the kind of, I'm going to say, that's the characteristic that I'm looking for when I'm interviewing people. Like, how are they going to interact with my patients? And, you don't always get it in the first interview. That's why I think you need to have people audition. If someone's going to come in, have them spend a half day with you. I don't even pay them. Pay them because if they're taking time off from work, but have them spend a half day or a day, have them shadow different people that they might be working with on a daily basis. And then ask your current team members, hey, what was that person like? Can you imagine them working here? Over a day, over 4 to 8 hours, you'll get to know a person a lot better than you will in a 30-minute interview. And start to see,
There's
is
a
this
couple
something?
things there. There's a couple things there, Shareef. Number one, that's not something you can fake. If you have somebody come in for, observation day and they do what you just explained, they can't keep that up for more than 15, 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour. But for a full day to keep up the act is extremely difficult. And it's just not your personality, not, as you said, not your DNA. So there's that. And then I also find that in roles at clinics, and no matter what role it is, you have to have a certain minimum standard of interpersonal people skills. Again, not to discount folks who don't, but how do we say it in the sales world? Putting the people in the right place on the bus. Make sure that their role suits their skill set and their personality and what they can deliver. And those folks don't have the best skills in the interaction with the patient area, that they can be more on back of the house, administrative, because those things are very rarely learned. Because again, I think it's part of someone's DNA and their personality.
Well, it's interesting too. We just think about the world we're now living in, the emergence of AI,
Hmm.
right? And I think AI, yes, AI is going to automate, is going to eliminate, is going to optimize a whole lot of things in our world, but I don't think it's ever going to replace this sacred relationship, this doctor to patient interaction or practice to patient interaction. And we want to have the best people there to provide that, what do we call it? The human touch, right? That's part of making the experience great. And, I mean, it's so bad right now. The kind of the baseline is so bad that any practice that invests in what I talk about in the book or, this course now that I have, PX90, any
Hmm.
practice that invests in that is gonna get an outsized return because very few medical practices are doing this, right? It is the typical healthcare experience is very mediocre, and you think about that, just the fact that there's a waiting room, right? That we're put on hold and told to wait on the telephone, right? Where someone yells our name from across the room. Oh, that violates HIPAA,
I still
but
see
they
that.
still do it, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, getting the right people on the team is paramount, paramount.
And the people on the team need the right environment to do their best work, leading us to the next driver. The fourth driver is place. The physical environment of a practice often gets overlooked. Can you share an example of how the design and atmosphere of a practice can either elevate or completely undermine the patient experience? I think that you spoke to it with the waiting room versus, I'm not sure what you call it now, but something like that, maybe another example that you can speak to that.
Absolutely. Well, and you think about it, and the best way I can help people really understand this is just imagine you walk into a place of business. We, as humans, we are forming impressions very quickly, microseconds, based on what we see, but also what we hear, and even maybe to a lesser extent, but even so, what we smell, right? The surfaces we touch, and even our sense of taste that's evoked when we walk into an environment. And I recommend something I do with clients called sensory assessment, where you actually look at each of the senses, not just what people see when they walk in. And the goal here is to define what it is you're trying to accomplish, what you want patients to, I'm not going to say feel, but what you want them to conclude. What adjectives, ask the question, what adjectives would patients use to describe our practice as they walk out the door at the end of the appointment, right?
Hmm.
Imagine someone was out there interviewing them and say, could you tell me, how was that for you? What was that practice like? Think about those words that you would like them to have, whether it's, wow, it was modern, it was efficient, it was kind, it was warm, it was informative, it was educational, you know, it was awesome, whatever that is, and design your environment to fit that, not the other
Hmm.
way around. Most people don't, I mean, the thought they give the environment is, oh, we need to have some chairs, we need to have some pictures on the wall. But I walk into place after place that, the pictures are from the 1980s. The chairs are wholly uncomfortable. There are like little signs about you got to pay your copay. It's due at the time visit. And it's like in a crinkled paper, poorly taped, crooked. I mean, if you're going to do something, put it in a frame and hang it nicely, right? Because everything communicates, not just what we say, but what we see when we walk into it. That communicates loudly. And it should be no surprise that if someone walks into an environment and, the coffee table's there and there's a bunch of crap all over the place, it's not neatly organized, or the practice has just so many racks filled with brochures. It's like, I call that billboarding. And there's nothing offered to drink. There's no coffee or tea. There's nothing to help bide the time. Well, it's not fair to expect that patient 30 to 60 minutes later, who's now been recommended to spend $8,000 out of pocket for an elective upgrade to their procedure. You expect them to say yes when the whole thing started off on the wrong foot. No, no, no. You want to do well, you've got to design this. And that's why the best businesses and the best medical practice understand that experience design is the physical environment and the behavior of our team members. Those are the two main components. That's why people in place go back to back right there.
So you mentioned, all these different sensory interactions, sight, sound, smell, and taste. And it would seem to me like those are more, you want to set up, I guess, speak to their subliminal mind. I mean, the brand of coffee, perhaps. Do you have a Keurig or do you have like the old, you know, drip coffee? I mean, those are things that are happening now in, just in some of those creature comforts of, a clinical environment on the front part of the house. Let me stop there and say, what do you call a waiting room instead of a waiting room now? What do you call it now?
I think, well, there's lots of reception area, lobby,
Okay,
greeting.
reception area. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
so in the reception area, that's that first impression that folks get when they walk through the door, and there's a lot of things coming at them, and a lot of those things are subliminal. What are the, like as you mentioned, the pictures on the wall, are they dated? Is the coffee area clean? What type of coffee is being served? Is it is are the chairs rickety and have scuffs? All those things are small little things, but they all stack up and again form the perception of their visit moving forward beyond the reception area.
if you're making people wait, you better have comfortable chairs, comfortable seating. And that's, I mean, that's a great investment. Yeah, the comfortable chairs are much more expensive than the cheap ones. I get it. But this is the place you are spending time, 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week. And it should be a great place. In fact, there's a saying one of my business partners says, he says, the practice should be made so it's a place you'd want to hang out in, right?
Huh, that's a
Think
great
about
saying.
that. As the doctor, as the staff member, it's a place we'd like to come to. It's a practice we'd like to be a patient at. Okay. That's really the standard we should be looking for, not settling for just some base kind of thing. If you settle for base, you're going to get base. You're going to get a base result. If you think about your business differently, you can that sets the whole trajectory. That's why what business are you in? What business are you truly in? Really sets the trajectory for future success. It's a mindset. Yeah, I see how you've done the research on my book, and we're four out of the six we've covered.
Yeah, so now even the best design practices needs visibility, which brings us to promotion. In a crowded marketplace, how do you help practices build awareness in ways that feel authentic and sustainable rather than gimmicky and transactional?
Well, the knee jerk reaction is, oh, we got to advertise. We got to advertise. We got to spend money. And I say, take your money and spend it inside your four walls and on doing things that make the experience better, as well as what we think of as internal marketing versus external paid marketing. There are so many opportunities for practices that are being missed because they're just not thinking. They're going to the easy button. Seems like it's advertising, but I can tell you in our practice, we do a fair amount of advertising. It's expensive. It is hard to measure at the end of the day. And so more and more of our focus has shifted to be internally. What can we do? What can we change in our environment? What can we change in the way we are communicating with patients to educate them and to create awareness for all that we do, right? That's on the services side. And then I talk about, earlier we talked about the perception of value. That's really about how we do what we do. And I think, David, it's worth saying that, just let's create a differentiation, a distinction between services. Those are the activities we perform. That's what we do. And experience is how we do what we do. And I think between doing a better job on the experience piece as well as internal marketing for most practices, that's going to carry the day. It's a better return on investment of your dollar, and will grow because people notice these things. In fact, advertising, its effectiveness is actually only waning over time. Think about why so many people subscribe to satellite radio. They don't want to listen to ads, right? Or I mean, the notion of putting an ad in a newspaper, very few people read print newspapers anymore. We have fast forward buttons on our TVs. When we record something, we just fast forward through the commercial, right? People don't want ads. What they want, going back to what we started earlier for, is to find solutions to their problems. And the more we do to help identify and help them become aware of their problem, right? Before we talk about our solution, the more they go, wow, they get me. They understand me. And that's a much deeper topic we can go into in story branding. But promotion is really about creating awareness in ways that are affordable. And, there are companies out there that don't spend much money on what we think of as traditional advertising that do very, very well. Starbucks in its first 10 years had never run an ad. The Geek Squad, which was acquired by Best Buy, as kind of computer repair service, they couldn't afford advertising. Everything they did was a form of advertising because they couldn't afford it. And that's why they
Is that
wore
right?
the kind of, it was like the dragnet meets
Yeah,
revenge nerds, kind of,
yeah.
the skinny ties and the short flood pants. And
Hmm.
who knew a generation later flood pants would become in fashion? Who knew? Right? But that was all very intentional because that was their advertising. The way their employees behaved, everything they did was a form of advertising and marketing that didn't cost money. And just here's an easy one for practices. Every employee should have a business card. And even better, that photo should be on the business card. Why? Because that turns every employee into an ambassador outside the practice to hand out business cards and say, hey, you need what we offer? Hey, give us a call, set up an appointment, let them know I sent you. I mean, it's easy and it's inexpensive. That's just one example of hundreds of things that practices can do.
And then there's the tricky subject that every doctor wrestles with. That's price. Fees and financials are always a sensitive topic. How can practices position price so that it supports the patient's decision-making process rather than becoming a barrier?
Well, there's kind of two or three kind of one statements I want to make on this. And we're going to take each one at a time. One is that people will pay for what they value. People will pay for what they value. And that is a way of kind of summarizing what has happened in what we call the experience economy. There is no question experiences, when done well, are more highly valued than the core services that are provided. The service is important, but it's how we do what we do that creates the greater value in society. And, whether it's where we get our coffee, I mean, the fact that now we pay $5, $6 for a cup of coffee that costs 30 to 40 cents to make illustrates what we mean by people pay for a better experience. And Starbucks kind of lost the plot. Starbucks was great, but there's been so many articles now written on how just from drive-through to the mobile ordering, they really lost in there. And their new CEO is trying to get it back, trying to get that mojo back. It's hard. Experiences can be measured as a distinct form of economic behavior with output. And that's what Pine and Gilmore, who wrote The Experience Economy, were talking about now 25 years ago. Like, hey, look at the world around us. Look at the world around us. The battleground of most retailers, automobile brands, hotels, restaurants is around experience and being able to command a premium. People will pay more for a better experience. We just know that. Look at what has happened in movie theaters. They have to attract people now. So they have the big cushy seats and you reserve a seat ahead of time and it's now $20. It's not $8 to go to a movie anymore, right? And sometimes the seats vibrate, they're trying to get a sensory thing going there, right? Um, or they move. I mean, it's unbelievable. And that's just one small example of where businesses are investing and will continue to invest. And, the tricky thing, so we'll get back to price in a second, but, again, people pay more for experiences. And what happens in medicine is that we have even a higher level of value that's created above experiences. And that's when the patient, the person, in this case, the patient, is changed, is transformed. And that's a transformational experience. It's something where they're changed. So someone to go from having to wear glasses to
Yeah.
not to being glasses free, that's a transformation. That's a transformational experiences. It's incredible. And what we notice when it comes to pricing is that a lot of people complain about the price of laser vision correction beforehand. Why is it so expensive, right? That's a reflexive question. That's not a real question. It's a false objection. It's too expensive, right? Most people in society have the money to pay for things they really want or will get or borrow the money. Most people do, not everybody, okay? You just got to make them want what you have. And we don't do a good enough job of that. And here's how we know. Because afterwards, after someone has LASIK, for example, they're like, wow, that was the best money I ever spent. And why didn't I do it sooner? Okay. So we know the transformation has happened. We have not done a good job of helping communicate the value ahead of time to help people understand. Now I understand why it costs what it costs.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a bunch of short chapters in that section on price to help unpack and unburden the doctor because it's tricky. It's tricky. And it's usually the thing that staff members, the counselors talk about first because it's the first question that gets asked. And the only reason it's the first question that gets asked is because patients don't know what to ask. So you want really well-skilled people in the art of conversation, of how to disarm that question and save it so you can address it later on, but you can discuss other things like their problem, their needs, their goals, right? The conversation needs to be about establishing value first and then talking about price. People have a reference point in their mind about how much something should cost. They walk in with that. They have no idea what goes into having a premium elective procedure, right? They have no idea. And so they just make assumptions and they're trying in their mind to compare it to other things they spend money on. I mean, I've written a lot of papers on this and I try to summarize this in the book. And the key thing is don't fall into the trap of talking about price first. It's like the most common phone call we get at Laser Eye Center when people call or go on our website is price. How much does it cost? And we have trained our team to be able to say, oh yeah, price is important. We're going to talk about that. First of all, my name's Shareef. Who am I speaking with? Right? Let's
Right.
talk about that. Right? What made you call in today? What's going on? Tell me about your vision, right? And then they'll start talking. And now you've established a little bit of a bond, a relationship. Yes, we can take care of that problem. We need to bring you in for a consultation. Yes, we don't charge the consultation. Yes, but we do charge. Our fees range from X to Y. I mean, that's the way the conversation should go, right? It's too easy to take the bait.
Right. I learned a formula years ago with respect to price and customer behavior. And I think it really does hold true. When value exceeds price by $1, that's the moment that the customer decides to buy whatever it is you're selling. And so the beautiful part about that is that you can always build more value until it reaches that point where, again, that $1 exceeds in their mind what the value in their mind of what the price is set at.
Right.
I've never believed in moving price because I think it takes away from the integrity of what you're selling. Because if you make a discount for 10%, well, maybe I really negotiate. If I'm a really good negotiator, maybe I get 15. And I think it just becomes a hornet's nest of like not being able to establish a constant price for everybody who comes in, no matter where they come from, no matter what their vision is in this case. But price should stay the same, and having that price integrity should be maintained. Where you have flexibility is building more value, and that can change for different people. Some people it could be just a few things, and for others, you'd have to add more value and explain to them, spend more time explaining what the services you offer and the experience that they have, building that to, again, in their mind, justify whatever price that you're charging for your product.
So on that, there's a saying that I've heard over the years from a book, Selling the Invisible. If 20% of your customers aren't complaining about price, your price is too low.
Who say that again?
If 20% of your customers aren't complaining about price, your prices
Huh?
may be too low. And I think the
Really?
lesson there is that, yeah, some people are going to complain. Now, if 90% of your people are complaining about your price, maybe it's too high. But you should expect there's going to be some people that will only buy on price. You're not going to win every encounter. Not everyone's going to sign up. That needs to be okay. It's really about training ourselves to expect that people are going to ask about price quickly, but that doesn't mean that price is the most important thing, because it's not. It is absolutely not the most important thing for 90% of the population. There are some say, I don't care. You're all the same. They view doctors as commodities. Everyone's the same. Every LASIK center is the same. So just give me
Mhm.
the cheapest price. There are people like that, but that's
Sure.
not most. That's 10% of the people. And I think your thought about establishing value, your comment, establishing value and continuing to build value, add value in the discussion so that people feel comfortable is yes, as they do that. And, discounting is just the path to it's very easy to do. It's very seductive, but discounting is really a path to just lowering it's obviously going to lower the financials, but also lowers how you feel about yourself. Feel like you gave
Yeah,
it away.
that's
It
wow.
undermines the value you're trying to create. Right?
Exactly. You're working against your own
That's
purpose.
right. That's right.
Interesting.
That's right. And
That's
fortunately, I
profound.
started talking about this almost 25 years ago, and I think a bunch of doctors have listened because they realize that discounting is not going to lowering your fees. Discount is not going to build a business. It doesn't work. It might temporarily get a little boost, but it doesn't work long term.
Right, right. So that covers the 6 drivers. But as you know, implementing them is never without challenges. What's the most common roadblocks you see practices facing as they try to elevate patient experience, and what's your blueprint for overcoming them?
Sure. Well, while the book was never intended to be an owner's manual, an operator's manual, if you will, it was just really intended to get the discussion going and helping doctors and practices understand the importance of patient experience, why it's so important, right, in the context of our bigger society and marketplace, and how to compete, where the competition's really moving. Main problem that doctors have is they go, these are great, and I love some of the ideas in here, but I don't know where to start. How do I get my team together? And that's where our training program really, really came and answered that PX90. And that really stands for Patient Experience Transformation in 90 Days. Literally, that is what we believe will happen. And we have created a structured approach, David, so that practices can start. And we use a kind of workout personal trainer motif, much like if you join a gym, right? You have workout 1 to workout 12. We have exercises, we have warm-ups, we have cool downs, we have a coach's corner, and it's all about creating a framework that practices can move through in an approach that well, it's an approach that's very approachable. And what the feedback we're getting from the practices going through is it's awesome, because now you have someone who works at the front desk or is a brand new technician. They have as much to offer in terms of what can be done to improve the patient experience than the most tenured person in the practice, right? The hierarchy between doctors, technicians, front desk billing, the hierarchy goes away because every one of us is a consumer, and getting around a table and going through these sessions together, and we structure them as a video with a playbook, and literally it's you go in and we provide examples, and then you talk as a team, hey, what can we do that's going to work in our practice? Because every practice is different. What works in practice A will not necessarily work in practice B, but the principles of patient experience don't change. The
Okay.
importance of understanding why reviews really matter, why we want to create a signature moment, why we want to eliminate negative cues, right? Those are just 3 of the topics we cover. Those are universal, and those don't change over time. But how practices respond and answer those questions are unique. And by the time they're done, their playbook is filled out, and they've got now their roadmap for how they can improve how patients experience them, and also not just for the patients, but for themselves. We find that the doctors, by the way, find more joy in their daily practice of medicine, because this takes them closer to why they became doctors in the first place.
hmm hmm
For team member, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I'd love for you to give our audience a peek maybe behind the curtain here with PX90. And could you take a moment to share your screen and show us how you formulated the training? Walk us through what a practice can actually expect when they follow your guide, PX90.
Yes, once people sign up for the program, and they can do it right at px90.com or pxmovement.com, they can learn about the program. David, they can actually take a quiz, a 2-minute quiz, and it'll give them some feedback about how the patient experience is in their practice today. And then they can see videos. They can see some testimonials from some of the practices that have already gone through it. And we've had 1 doctor practices, and we've had a group with 18 locations and 180 employees all go through PX90. So we're confident that it works. And this is divided up into 12 sessions. We call them workouts. And here you see them there. What business are you in? Reimagining the doctor-patient relationship and improving the definition of your physical and emotional spaces. Okay, capitalizing on time and language, the hero's journey, memorability in the signature moment. We talk a lot about reviews and how to build a better review gathering process. Service recovery is a real critical issue. Building your team and building up your team. It's all about the people on the team. Let the experience be the marketing. We talked about that earlier, and then price comes last. And if I just click into any one of these lessons, then what comes up is a video on the screen that you just simply press play. Right below that is the length of the workout. We say, hey, plan for about 40 minutes for this workout. And the video is just under 13 minutes. And I tell you in the video, now pause here and go ahead and do the warm up or do the exercise. So it's interactive in that way. We talk
Nice.
about what we expect them to gain here. They're going to learn about the progression of economic value, foundational model. They click here if they want to see the workout on screen, the actual pages from the workbook, and you can see it right there. So we ask people as a warm up, how do you answer this question? What do you do for work? Right? We're establishing a baseline around this question about what business are you in? And in this first workout, we talk about the difference between service, what you do, and experience, how you do it. We have practices now start to list out what it's like for them. We talk about the progression of economic value, which I mentioned earlier today, and a transformation being the highest form of value that can be created in society. And we have other exercises as well, but this just gives people an idea of what this looks like, and it all comes in a book. You get a physical book, and it's really important.
I was just about to ask, is this all
Yeah.
digital assets, or is there a hard copy that people can physically hold?
Yeah, we provide the hard copy as well because people want to write their answers. It's a different experience in the brain when you write versus typing. So this is important, and some practices do this where they have The team members all do it on their own because we can give everyone a login. They do it on their own. They come together and discuss it. Some do it live. They do it all as a group. It really is meant to be flexible. And while we do think there's an order to the 1 to 12, there's a rationale about doing that. I've had practices say, hey, we're going to start on number 5. We want to talk about the patient as the hero and dig into that because that's really important to us. Always making sure the patient is the hero and we, as the doctors and the team members, we are the guide. If the doctor becomes the hero, and that's too easy to do in medicine, it's too easy to do because miracles that doctors perform every day, that doesn't really work for the patient nearly as well as when we make the patient the hero. So we
Hmm.
dig into that, but that's just a little look at the at that. And on the website itself, I'll just go right over there. There's lots of information that people can dig into. And it's not only about the program, but we have a lot of resources. I do a weekly newsletter that ties to a blog. And you can see here every week we are publishing content that
Hmm.
practitioners can get in their inbox. We have taken the book Beyond Bedside Manner and we've divided it into I think it's 57 videos total, one for
Wow.
each insight in the book that literally you can just click on. You click on it and it takes you to the playlist within YouTube and you can play one, you can play them all right there. So we've created that to help seed and educate and get people thinking about patient experience. And I believe so strongly in the value of the program itself, and other doctors do as well. They're absolutely, and this is like the content. We give a guarantee. We actually
Hmm.
guarantee that if you actually dig into this and you find there's no value, I'll give you your money back. No problem. We want to make this
Wow.
really easy,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
The cost of the program is $3,500 and you own the program. There are options. You can upgrade and add training with one of our PX90 coaches. It's me, and we have 3 others as well that can coach you. And we do that remotely via Zoom. We meet with you, and we can come on site as well. There's an additional fee for that if that's something that a practice would like. But we have created an entire infrastructure, and that's really the takeaway here. For doctors that want to get started, they now have a structured approach available to them that is easy to follow. And I love what Rob Melendez said in his little video here. Every patient is going to have a patient experience. The question is, what type of experience are you delivering? Is it
Hmm.
amazing or just average?
Shout out to
And
Robert Melendez. His operation in Albuquerque is amazing. That guy
yeah,
is really, he is all in on patient experience. I had the
absolutely.
pleasure of visiting his location of his clinic before he moved to the big one, I think. And he really does. I mean, well, him as a person, he's just really buttoned up and very, very
Yeah,
polished.
yeah.
And his clinic is a physical representation of him. He really swings for the fences on the patient experience piece. When you said that the Beyond Bedside Manner, uh, this wasn't the initial thrust and intent, and the PX90 was kind of born of it. What was the transition from, with the necessity to really provide this very valuable tool from the book to the program?
Doctors are asking for it. I've had
Okay,
thousands of doctors read the book.
got it.
And the question that comes back is, hey, what's next? Are you going to do another book? And I said, no, now what I need to do is I needed to basically put all this knowledge and the specific training into a program that would allow more doctors access to it. There's only so much of me to go around. And I didn't want to go ahead.
And I will say that, I mean, this isn't just for ophthalmology, right? This is actually, it's non-specific in terms of cardiology, ophthalmology. This can be applied to any medical practice, correct?
Yes, any medical practice, and also not just ones that have a lot of self-pay or
Hmm.
elective. Certainly the concierge medicine at the primary care level, they're starting to get into this now. But every doctor, any doctor who cares about customer service, any doctor says, I believe this is important. I believe that treating my patients better, not just clinically, but in their customer needs actually matters and will make our practice better, right? Better in every way. A better place to come to for patients, a place that team members and doctors would want to come to themselves. And you will attract more patients that way. So your practice will grow organically and naturally, not because it was artificial, because you did a big advertising campaign. Nothing wrong with advertising, but patient experience is something that is sustainable for the long term. That's really the idea here. Creating something that is yours forever. And it's really hard to imitate, right? People could walk into Rob's practice and take ideas away and implement them, but it wouldn't be the same as Rob's practice, right? And that's the beauty of it. And I know, because I know Rob Melendez and work closely with him, Rob will continue to innovate. And when someone copies him on something he did this year, he's already thinking about what's going to happen next year and the year after. That's what the best practices do. They're continuously innovating, they're continuously improving because
Mhm.
experiences need to be refreshed. Starbucks is that example I brought up earlier. Hey, it used to be really cool to go to Starbucks. Now it's like, keep away. But other premium coffee shops have done a great job, and that whole category has blossomed because of what Starbucks did. So they should be congratulated, and they've been well rewarded in the marketplace for it over time.
That's the system you've created. But I want to bring it back to your own practice for a moment. You run one of the nation's top refractive surgery practices. How has your own practice at Laser Eye Center of Silicon Valley served as a testing ground for the strategies you talk about in your book?
Well, I could not have predicted how my career might change a little bit given COVID. I
Hmm.
had been doing years of consulting and working with companies and practices around the country, but COVID changed everything. And it was even just about that time that I met Craig Bindi. He's the medical director at the Laser Eye Center of Silicon Valley and the owner. And we talked about his goals and dreams. What did he want to accomplish? And I realized that I could help him without getting on an airplane because he's here where I live in the Bay Area. And he said to me, he said, Shareef, I want my practice to be a laboratory, an experimental laboratory for everything in the book, because the book was just coming out at that time. And I gave him a preview copy and I said, we can do that. And so to date, I think we're at 44 of the 57 insights in the books have been implemented. They were doing some great things before I got there, but we've taken the practice to a new level. Now, Joe Ling is our lens specialist, and Sudhindra Kaushik is now our lens specialist here at our Pleasanton location.
I
So
know.
we now have 3 surgeons, and we've gone from being a LASIK practice to a fully integrated LASIK and lens. We do all 5 procedures, and so it's completely transformed what we do because we recognize that it is the patients that vote with their trust and with their pocketbook, and we wanted to make our entire facility and our entire process, which we're working on making better and better every day, as good as the surgical outcomes that we provide. So we really, I'll say we take our own medicine, right? This notion you can't let it be all about getting 20/20 vision. That's important. That's great. And that happens a lot, all the time, pretty much in LASIK. But it's got to be more than that because
Hmm.
other practices can get 20/20 vision too for their patients. So we focus heavily on that on a daily basis. Our front desk team's incredible. We call them concierges, and the way they greet people when they walk in, the physical plant has been renovated to make it a place you'd want to walk into. And it hadn't been renovated in 20 years when I arrived, so we did that. But it's been an incredible experience. And to summarize that, it is what that experience at Laser Eye Center helped really inform what happened in the training program, because it helped me take what was in the book and put it into a frame that every practice can approach. Because here's the truth: change is hard. Change is difficult because as humans, we resist change. So I wanted to create a teaching system that could help practices embrace this instead of think, it's another brick in my backpack. It's another thing I got to do. And so it's, the content is really around stuff that we can relate to in our everyday lives. And we look outside the walls of our practice to understand how to make things better inside the practice.
And I think what a blessing it is to be able to use your own practice and have partners like Dr. Bindi and Dr. Ling as an incubator to perfect some of these, this ever evolving, menu of strategies to, provide better patient experience out in the greater marketplace. To be able to test it on yourself, as you said, and take your own medicine. I think that is an absolute amazing opportunity for you to be able to, again, perfect the product before, offering it to folks who paid good money for it.
We do things we weren't doing 5 years ago. We do virtual consultations because we have the technology now. We make that easy, and the whole thing, because we don't accept insurance. So we are a pure refractive
Wow.
practice.
Yeah,
We
you're
don't
the
have a
true.
billing department. So we are dependent on every person walking through that door is a potential paying customer. But we're also very clear that we end up telling about 20% of our patients, you are not a good candidate for this, right?
Hmm.
And so we're
Hmm.
very comfortable with that. We give conservative advice on procedures that work. So we understand our value proposition. We work on, again, refining how we do what we do every day. You're never done. You never say mission accomplished in this. That's the whole philosophy of continuous improvement. And, my friend Vance Thompson said it really well when he helped me launch this at our launch event. He said, once you go down this path, it is something that you will find, wow, it just opens up so many doors. This path of understanding that the patient is also a customer, that our environment can be improved in such a way that it's more attractive and patients want to spend their time and their money with us, right? Once you go down that path, it is a journey that never ends. It is a continuous one. And my goal is to be here to help guide practices through it. This program does it in a way that is scalable. We can reach more doctors, more administrators, more staff members, more patients, and help many, many more patients have a better experience around the country and around the world. We're now I think, on 4 different continents, and growing. So this is, exciting. If someone's interested in this, I just encourage them to go start checking it out at the website, PX Movement.
Well, I got to say that you mentioned, Rob Melendez earlier, then you mentioned Vance Thompson just now. Again, I once had the, honor and pleasure of stopping by their Moorhead location of Vance Thompson Vision. And we're doing a demo for one of our products. And I had the opportunity to visit and do an in-service. And I got to meet pretty much every single person in every role at the practice. And I'm telling you, they are the mark. That place is amazing. These folks stick around for, these folks are, there are obviously new people, but the vast majority of people that I actually interacted with were there for multiple years and just so happy. And they talk about the culture. So I think it ties in with providing great patient experience is also taking care of your employees and creating that environment. So, if Vance Thompson is a byproduct or evidence of your book or any form of it, you're on the right track, my friend.
Well, you can read here. He wrote, and I'll put it up closer to the camera. He was kind enough to give me the quote that went on the top of the cover of the book.
Nice.
What all practices need to go to the next level. And it's true. It's true. And it starts with mindset. It starts with a doctor saying, yes, this is important. If the doctor doesn't believe it, there's nothing I can say or do that's going to convince him this is important.
Right.
And there are doctors out there. But increasingly, more and more are going, you know what? When I reflect on my own behavior as a consumer, how I do research, how I look to make decisions on things, I increasingly recognize that the things that are important to me are, in terms of how we're treated as customers, are also important to my patients. It doesn't go away just because they're walking into a medical office.
Well said. Well said. So looking beyond today, I'm curious about what's coming next. Where do you see the future of patient experience heading, and what will patients be demanding 5 or 10 years from now that practice should be preparing for today?
I think AI is going to create a bifurcation between ultra efficient and then kind of premium. I think there's a fork in the road that's coming. And there's so many issues in healthcare. That's such a big question. Let me just give you my take is that patient experience isn't going away. It's only going to get bigger and more important as consumers have new and better tools for evaluating what happens when they go see the doctor. And again, I'm not focusing on the clinical care. I'm focusing more on how they're treated as people, right? I think reviews will evolve into something new and different. But this consumer empowerment is not going away. And at the same time, our healthcare system is getting crushed with too much demand, not enough money to pay for everything, and a reduced supply of doctors, particularly in ophthalmology. So there will be innovation on the technology side that I think it will both address being more efficient in clinic and a better experience for patients.
That's real.
I think
That's
that will
real.
happen. An early version of that is something that's not more efficient, but the light adjustable lens from RxSight is a really interesting one where patient experience is embedded in the technology, where the patient is giving feedback after an IOL is implanted on how well they're seeing, and that feedback goes to adjust to help them see better and have a better outcome. And they're involved directly in their care. That's an example, and I think we'll see more and more of that in eye care and throughout medicine.
So on a lighter note, you've worked with so many teams over the years. There must have been some fun moments along the way. What's one of the funniest or most unexpected lessons you've learned about patient experience in your career?
Well, it's a great question. And I think, I would tell you the lesson is it's the little things that matter most. And I don't mean you have to have the best brand of coffee. You talked about coffee earlier on. Oh, what brand do you have? I don't mean that. I just mean it's paying attention to the details, and it's these little things more than it is having a grand, beautiful Taj Mahal type facility. Focus first on how people are treated. And, I learned a valuable lesson when you were talking about Vance Thompson. I first worked with him, and gosh, it was 20 years ago that I walked into his practice under the pseudonym Ray Miller, my father-in-law. And I had an exam, and because they knew people had heard my name, Shareef, they'd heard it in the practice. So if I walked in as Shareef, they might have acted differently because they knew me, and Vance and I were close, are close today. We tell the story. We laugh at the story about Ray Miller because I went and I had a consultation, and I was taking notes on my BlackBerry at the time of things that I was observing. And I had a long list of things that I thought violated some good principles, like chewing gum, technicians chewing
Ooh,
gum. I didn't like that. Chatter
violation.
outside in the hallway that I could hear, the laughter while I'm sitting there waiting for a doctor, right? And when we gave this feedback to the team, well, first of all, we brought him. I said, "Oh, by the way, this isn't Ray Miller. This is Shareef." And people were angry. They were mad at Dr. Thompson. They thought that he had tricked them by bringing me in undercover. You remember that show, Undercover Boss? Remember that
Yeah,
show
of
on
course.
TV? It was like our own little version of that, right? And so it was fun, and I was there for a week. And by the time we got to day 3, the love affair was restored between me and the team. But they were mad. They thought they
Mhm.
had been duped. And I said, no, it was the only way we could get an honest assessment of what was really going on in the practice. And by the end of the week, we were holding hands and hugging, and it was a great experience. And that was really the first stage because he had just hired Matt Jensen, who had never been an administrator before. And over the better part of 20 years, Matt led that organization from one location with 26 employees to now 6 locations in 5 or 6 states with coming up on 500 employees. And, I feel such pride because I was there early to help guide them. They did the work. They put in the work, and you were able to see that. And look, not every practice is going to be able to have the resources to do, or even the desire to do, what Vance Thompson Vision has become. That's not the point. Everybody can get better. Everybody. A 1-doctor, 4-employee practice can get better and do things that have the same impact on patients that Vance Thompson Vision has on theirs, without question. And it all starts with the head, getting the head right, and then being open to the material and learning and working with your team. Because the doctor, as the other lesson, doctor can't do it alone. Vance could have never done this on his own. He has an incredible team of people and leaders that
Indeed.
have taken that on. Many more surgeons now, and have created something really special that will last, long after he's done practicing medicine.
Yeah. So what you're telling me is those providers, those leaders of practices need to decide, commit, and follow through.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Very
we
well.
give them the playbook, the guidance to do that in a way that is safe
Mhm.
and empowering. And it's
Right.
really fun for me to get the messages, the text messages, the emails, the photos, and the videos sent to me by practices out there on what they're doing. And we keep adding them to the website in our photo gallery to say, hey, stuff's doing stuff. I mean, one practice, Buena Vista in Texas, sent me a picture. They bring everyone together and do arms in the middle, break. They do that at the end of every PX90 session. Love it. Like 30 people getting together. It's like a football team. I love that. I love that. And
That
that
is awesome.
really, David, I would just tell you, just to kind of sum up our conversation, which I've really enjoyed. You asked great questions, by the way.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. Thank you. My mission at this stage in my career, part of it is to help doctors understand that their patients are also their customers. It's truth. And part of it is just the joy I get seeing practices change, seeing them break out of what is mediocrity in healthcare
Mhm.
and doing better for their patients and for themselves. And that gives me great joy. That is what fuels my fire and builds my spirit to be able to speak with you, to be able to give lectures at the meetings and do, a lot of writing and coaching and teaching, and really make this so that when we look back 5, 10 years down the road, going to the doctor will not be that old legacy of it was awful. I'm like, hey, I went to the doctor. It was actually really good. It was a good experience, right? That's what we're aiming for, and we can get there. We can absolutely change the world in this regard. And I appreciate you helping spread the message here via your podcast.
Well, Shareef, this has been such an insightful conversation. Before we close, I want to acknowledge the impact you've made in helping doctors elevate their practices and their patient relationships. For our listeners who want to learn more, where they can find you, your book, some of your resources with PX90, and to connect with you directly, where can that be?
Well, the best place is for the book, just go to Amazon. Just get it. You get it in a couple days, Beyond Bedside Manner. Write a review. This always helps grow.
Always.
If you want lots of copies of the book, you got to get in touch with me. You can do that through LinkedIn. You can do that through our website, pxmovement.com. And I encourage you to check it out. There's so many resources on that website that we've already went through just a few of them. Look at the blogs, look at the videos, take the PX quiz. That's a great step. Take the PX quiz. It takes 2 minutes and start down the path. You won't regret it.
Hey, man. Well, thanks for joining us today and sharing such powerful insights. You've given us a roadmap to not only grow our practices, but to truly serve patients in the way they deserve. For everyone listening, don't miss the book, Beyond Bedside Manner. It's a must read for anyone in healthcare who wants to thrive in the modern era. As always, we'd like to thank Riverside FM and Passionate Media for making this show happen. And of course, Meridian Medical for making it possible. That's a wrap for this episode of the Q Switch Conversations podcast. Until next time, I'm Spence, and I'm out.
You're listening to The Q Switch with your host, Spence.